Today we're talking storytelling. You have no idea what I see in front of me. So Lynn Joffe is in studio. And the last time I got to see you was on a video because you're a podcast winner. Tell me about your win, Lynn Joffe.
Well, it's called the South African Podcast Guild Awards. It's a guild that's been created because podcasting is coming up, and they had awards. I didn't even know we were entered. So the win was an absolute gobsmacking surprise to me. So the Solid Gold Storytime, which is my podcast, has actually won Podcast of the Year in the SAPG inaugural awards.
I enjoy collaborations and when people come together. You've got a podcast and we have a podcast.
Yeah.
And we help people. I listened to some of your work and your stories are beautiful.
Well, thank you. I've got a thing about the inner child as we spoke about earlier. And if you can access that, it takes a lot of work. It's like if you can actually dig down and recall that inner child, in a sense, one writes out of the inner child. So having not had my own physical children and having lots of other people's children, I can almost kind of gauge the way I was going to say level, but it's not the level. Gauge where the imagination is, where the interest is, and in fact storytelling, because there is always a beginning, middle, and end. There always are stakes. There always is something that changes in the end, and it's a brilliant way to, in a sense, foster values into little kids and their parents that I feel are worthy.
Lynn was raised on 4 continents.
I sure was.
So for those of you who are listening to the podcast that can't see her, she is like a cross between a gogo aunt.
Thank you.
Beautiful woman. I kissed her on her lips. Mwah.
And Laurie Anderson.
She interchanges her quirky glasses. So she went from sunglasses to a red frame.
My celeb glasses.
I know. And what makes you remarkable is your storytelling and how you remind us how important storytelling is. I remember when the kids were younger, I actually taught the 3-year-old how to rap. So I would go, and now the 3-year-old is 9, and I don't know how she does it, but she's able to do singing.
Beatbox.
Yes.
It's incredible.
She'll go, I'm going to try. Happy birthday. Okay, you have to keep going.
Okay.
Happy birthday. But in one voice. I know you did the beatboxing.
Oh, you mean she can do both
she
at
does
the same
both
time?
at the same time.
That's
so
bizarre.
what is
That's bizarre. In fact, my co-composer Adam, who's a lot older than your daughter, I assume, can do it as well. And he used to have knitting needles. He said when he was a little kid, he was Ringo from the Beatles.
He was drumming.
And any time, in fact, he's doing it all the time. So sometimes he verbalizes it, and mostly it's like Michael Jackson, his quantiles. Oh. He was keeping it in 16ths. It's true.
Like Martina Navratilova.
Ish. That's fantastic, though, because rhythm is the precursor to everything. You've been carried in your mother's womb. She's moving around. It's loud in there. But if you're hearing rhythm and the voice of the mother and the rhythm of life, and it's being stimulated in utero, I really believe that. Fetal horses gallop in the womb.
Wow.
And and the ears are developed, the rhythm is developed. So my mother has proclaimed that I could sing Summertime at the age of 6 months. I came out the womb singing Three Little Duckies, which is, my mom's way of sort of claiming the music. We'll take that out of the mix. So
we're definitely leaving it in.
Are you leaving it in? Mom, it's just the way it is. But so in other words, the rhythm, the rhyme, the fact that children are carried on backs, the fact that you are rocking a baby to sleep. But I don't speak to pregnant women's tummies, but they can hear you in there. So hello, my baby.
Oh.
And then the rhythm from my little childhood. I don't know why it does, Ilana, but it all comes out in rhyme. Iambic pentameter, iambic tetrameter. I had to actually look them all up. Ooh. And then you can limerick it. It just comes out that way, and sometimes with music as well.
So rhythm and music and reading to our children, that happens already. The development of child and understanding or even enjoying storytelling can happen and develop in the womb. And as an author and a writer, should we read to the unborn baby?
I believe so. Because even if the child isn't necessarily comprehending, because when they're born, they always say often babies have got everything, and the moment they're born, they forget everything. I'm not sure. It's a Kabbalistic notion that an angel comes and kisses them on the philtrum and they forget everything.
Right.
The night fairy who does it, which is a beautiful story in itself. Be that true or be that untrue, the intuition, I would call it, almost the biological intuition of a child, is to respond to rhythm. Which is why rhymes, we all remember rhymes from our childhood. They come up, I could dictate the whole of Winnie the Pooh to you right this minute. James, Morrison, Weatherby, George Dupree.
Boet en Saartjie, ons bly hier.
Ja. En al die dinge. So, and then I think that evolves. I think music is a brilliant way, musical rhymes is a brilliant way of repetition. Little children have to repeat and repeat, and then you've got the parents going, do we have to listen to this again? And I like to put in what I call little Easter eggs for the parents. It's actually what every story has to have, what I call a message or a core value or a plot, really. What is happening? What does this character want or need, and how is it going to be resolved? And so the older they get, the more they could say follow a storyline, but the parents are following it from, day one. I don't want to bore them to death. So in a way, one's writing on several levels, but one's actually writing it once. I don't want to say it's a gift, because it's an innate DNA
It is a gift.
thing. But I've evolved it quite substantially over the years.
We're chatting today to Lynn Joffe. Now, I mentioned earlier she has this amazing podcast. What's it called and where can we follow it?
It's called Solid Gold Storytime. Solid Gold Storytime is a Solid Gold production. And you probably know this better than me at the moment, Ilana, because you can type in Solid Gold Storytime and find it on the internet. And then there's a kind of a line that Gavin told me to say, and I said I didn't understand it, but I do because of people are listening.
Yeah.
Wherever you get your podcasts. Actually, it's Solid Gold Storytime. Look it up. It comes up straight away. It's also on Spotify. Aren't you on Spotify?
We are. Now, they were recently awarded the Podcast of the Year at the inaugural South African Podcast Awards. You can feel that Lynn's energy is infectious, and it's so beautiful. You are a storyteller. You are, as I mentioned earlier, you're almost like the gogo that I never had.
That's a very double-edged compliment, but I'll take it. I actually call myself Auntie Lala on the podcast because Auntie and not Tanny. I know we can have a long discussion about that. It's just culturally difficult. So, and ma'am. But actually, that's okay. Auntie Lala, but I'll be your go-go, honey.
Why did you start telling stories? I mean, we all have this desire to make sure that our children have enough. My dad and my mom didn't have a lot of books, but I remember growing up, ons het Bolly gelees. Bolly was in a local magazine. Do you remember Bolly? And Dad had his own stories. He used to tell them in Afrikaans. So my dad would make up stories about boomvlegter and boomtrekker, and they were always in competition with each other as to who could plait the trees the fastest. Wow. And it was majestic. They had supernatural powers. How did you start telling stories?
But I think you've answered the question. It comes from the parents. So I was sung to, because my mother was a singer, is a singer. I was sung to and sung to and sung to. Then I was read to and read to. It got to the point, apparently, where I could turn the page exactly on the word, the little bunny.
And the kids do that.
Because memory works that way. And then I started, I think I come from a very verbal family. To put it very mildly. The only time we stop talking is when we've got a fishbone stuck in our throat. It's like that. So it was, and then today, and in fact they talk about in more disadvantaged homes where children are less stimulated because of the means, children develop less of a vocabulary. So, and they call it, in homes where the parents are engaged, decontextualized conversation. So instead of just saying sit, stand, go to sleep, wake up, it's what did you do today? Let's color in. What's your favorite color? So in other words, a stimulation in ordinary speech can actually connect with the storytelling because the story tells a message, and the message is, you do get nursery rhymes. We all fall down, which was the plague apparently then. No ring-a-ring rosies. Yeah, we all fall down.
Yeah, most of them end quite grim.
Yes, very grim. In fact, it's the Grimms that made it grim. And then Disney sort of erased all the grimness. But I do think that little kids also like to be, scared and then contained. So the giant is coming, almost pantomime-y. But maybe this is very old-fashioned, but keep going on about the story arc. If there's because now I've been teaching workshops for all ages and all genres, if you like. So the podcast is the audio, kind of the audio speak. But even in the novel that I wrote, it had to sound to the ear. In fact, I'm busy after years. I'm still doing an audiobook on Wonder because every single word had to be heard out loud by me in order to resonate on the page. Maybe, and records. Ilana, records in my childhood.
No,
the
it's
songs,
music.
Sparky's Magic Piano, Danny Kaye's Little Fiddle, and they were clever. Peter and the Wolf. Het jy Peter en die Wolf gehad?
Nee, maar because we're a musical family, we make up songs on the piano. Which brings me to my next question. I mean, a lot of us are not creative. We are not able to make up stories. Is that why you created your podcast, so that we can hear stories?
Okay, I'm actually shaking my head, but nobody can see it. Because, ask the question again. Why did I make up stories? Okay, so this is almost a theorem. If I would do a PhD in this, I believe that every single human being on this planet is musical. Every mommy, every daddy, every gogo, every granny, and I can prove it to you. And if sound effects up, doof doof. What's the first sound you ever hear? Doof doof. You could do it with me if we're in a workshop. Doof doof. And then doof doof becomes ticka ticka, because the baby's heart beats there as well. So we are actually innately responsive to the rhythm of our bodies, if you like. And then it moves into the mind as you kind of sort of expand it. So and I think Salman Rushdie says, mankind is the storytelling animal. If you look at the Bible, we all had some kind of biblical history. We don't remember whether you had to mix linen with cloth when the moon was full, but you will remember Sodom and Gomorrah. You will remember Cain and Abel. You'll remember the story of the two brothers. It's almost all in there. So we innately, I believe, I don't know if it's genetic or DNA or atmosphere, we are hardwired into stories because they bring arousal, they bring awareness, and they bring action. It's been proven, as you're looking at me now, as I'm telling you the story. In fact, as we are on a podcast, theatre of the mind becomes engaged, which is also why I like audio stories.
So why did you make a podcast? I mean, was it because what you're saying is sure, it's inspirational and it's taking me on a journey. I mean, I've already got 100 questions. But if we as parents want access to stories because perhaps, let's just call a fact, sometimes life is busy.
Yeah. Sometimes you're on a very long road trip to nowhere.
Are
we there yet? Are we there, Mommy? Are we there yet? It's like, shush, darling.
So instead of sticking a device in their hands, we can listen to a story together.
100%.
You are and have been in the speaking business for many, many years.
I just can't shut up.
And why a podcast? Why did you decide? Why did you decide to make an award-winning podcast?
Oh yes, I decided. So this is a little bit of a sad tale, and I haven't really been able to share this, but I did mention to you. So my only beloved sister, my little sister, passed from cancer 2 years ago, coming up, and she lived in Cyprus. It was all very dramatic and tragic and ended badly. But we reconnected.
Long life.
Thank you, thank you. And we're not young girls anymore. But when I got there, and I in fact went there in the spring, in the summer, in the fall, in the winter, I went to Cyprus 4 times. And during that time, it's almost like we reconnected with our childhood. We'd been separated when we were very young. My sister went to America. I stayed here, 4-continent story. And we started to sing again together the songs of our childhood. Now, remember, she had lung cancer. In between the nebulizing and her ability to kind of want life still.
Do you know? I'll tell you this later.
So we harmonize, and she has a voice so low. And she would harmonize. And when I bought this beat-up guitar, I borrowed a beat-up guitar because I'd been having jazz lessons, and Lane didn't like the jazz. She liked the kiddie songs. And so in a way, it was like it wasn't at the time considered to be therapeutic, but it obviously was.
It was, yeah.
Other part of that is 2 weeks after she was diagnosed, her own daughter had a daughter. So Riley Page was born literally as my sister was diagnosed. So there was this baby in the house, remembering that I don't really do baby, look at the baby, but now I'm looking at the baby, I'm engaging with the baby. So after her passing, and we've got a few little videos that we made together where she was just the beautiful, sparky weirdo that she was. And so in a way, the podcast, there were a lot of archives because I've done this for a long time, but the motivation, which I didn't know consciously then, was in a sense to honor my sister. And in fact, because of the award winning, because we had to do little videos for every category, and I was always honored and blessed, and thank you to everyone. And in my last one, which I had no idea I'd win because it was all virtual, I said, and I'd like to dedicate this to my sister. And so it came to pass. So the award winning was a very separate thing. What I also feel, even at my advanced age, is that my voice, I've been in advertising for a very long time, and Adam, like I said, is my musical partner. So I would come with an idea, we would put it down, I would do the voiceovers, and then we'd be replaced by the person that the agency would want to do.
Right, because the talent gets replaced. Right.
Talent gets replaced, political correctness, etc. And it kind of felt, because I've been through such a grief state, it's like coming out of the grief state. I said, well, what about my voice? What about my original voice? What about telling the stories to my dead sister and her living offspring to actually, in a sense, find my own voice? It sounds so twee.
It's also a beautiful, and you're talking about almost a sense of legacy. I enjoy the truth and the story of you and your sister coming together and then sharing. So my sister lives in the UK. She's British. Okay. And when we meet up, no matter how many times a year it is or where we find ourselves, because we grew up in the church, and I mean, we're talking 40 years ago, when Helga and I get together, I'm at the piano and we always sing songs, and it's always that of our childhood, So there's this musical connection, and then there's storytelling that connects us.
But music, I think music in itself is a story. So even if it's red and yellow and pink, what are you doing? You're telling a child what a rainbow song is. And then if the mummies, back to your point of, we're not all storytellers, we are all storytellers. And so if you're coming from a musical family, you had the music. If you're coming from a family that can't sing in tune, that doesn't matter. In fact, Devon, my niece, can't sing in tune. Sorry, Devon. and in fact, songs of the Beatles, because she had recorded, the daughter had recorded the mother who died's favorite songs, and a lot of them were Beatles songs. And the new baby, because there's another baby now. Riley had a brother called Ryan. And
hello, guys.
One of Ryan's aunties said to Devon, my niece, have you been playing the Beatles to this baby in the night? And she said, don't be silly, of course I haven't. She said, Yellow Submarine, this child starts dancing in his crib. And we all live in a yellow submarine. What does that even mean? It doesn't matter. It's imagination. And little children can, I think, relate into, the nonsense rhymes, the jabberwockies, the sound effects of fee, fi, fo, fum. The first story I ever read to myself. I smell the blood of an Englishman. I just didn't realize it would be your sister.
Lynn is the author of The Gospel According to Wanda B. Lazarus, a novel. Okay. But what I'm more interested in is The Tale of Stingray Charles. Are you going to read for us?
Okay, so Thomas the Jazz Cat and Blixen the Bone lived next door to each other at the edge of a township called Chameleon Creek. Every day they sang the same old song, and I don't have the backtrack, so they sang, I'm so bored of playing boring songs all day long. And Blixen went, I'm so tired, it's exhausting playing tunes all day long. It really does sound better on musical, on the podcast. One day, they took a break from playing the same old tune and decided to play a spot of soccer down by the creek. Blixen kicked the ball with all her might. The ball went up. The ball came down. It hit the ground and rolled towards the creek. The ball came to rest against a dull grey water pipe they'd never noticed before. And here's another little song, now in the minor key. Don't go there, very scary, it's a snare. Don't go there. And Blixen in counterpoint goes, I'm going in. So it's don't go, I'm going in. Very, I am not scared. I'm going there. From deep within the water pipe, they heard an extra strange and extraordinary sound. There in the darkness glowed a strange, luminous egg. The egg began to crack. Don't touch it, said Thomas. Look, it's growing. Look, it's going. And from the egg and from the glow emerged a being they didn't know, the strangest sight they'd ever seen, the strangest worm that had ever been. And I think the rest would be better on the podcast. And so they meet Pit-a-Pat the crazy caterpillar, who's kind of we call him the agent of change, to change out of your boring everyday life and go on an adventure in your mind with music. And then they go and save a stingray called Stingray Charles from singing other people's music.
I love the story.
And we have performed it all over story. It's actually been used at WITS and at the WITS Education School and UJ for teaching young student teachers how to tell stories. Because it's got accents and costumes and sing-songs and comprehension. And it's like I say, I love to, how do you say, train the trainer? And actually show mostly young women, but all teachers. You don't have to, say, and then the boy read. You know how small children sometimes read without that comprehension, make it flow. It is like a performance. It's
interesting you say that, because when my husband and I, we still do story time for the kids. My baby is 7 and then my older one is 9. And they still enjoy a bedtime story and us reading it. And I'm the preferred, just so you know, because I animate and I make the BFG sound like he is. He's kind of nasal, and the little girl. So one can almost learn to be a little bit more creative and theatrical.
Yes. But that's the thing, is we speak before we can read. Do you know what I mean? It's a precursor.
You're right.
So when you read, shouldn't you be like sort of drawing on? That's why I said the inner child again. A child's not going to say, "I went to school." It's like, today in the soccer match, I scored a goal. That's a little story.
Yeah. It's the excitement. I like the inner child because it's the excitement and it's the mimicking of the inner child.
And the rediscovery, because a lot of us get it wiped out of us by circumstance.
So you're saying everyone is a storyteller?
Absolutely. Every human on this earth who can speak.
What if you are stuck as a parent and we need to learn? Give me 5 tips. How can I want to become a better storyteller? You're a storyteller and an author. Okay, so the one thing I learned is that we can animate. We can access...
Yes.
Which age would I be in my inner child hearing a story?
That's a
6 years old. I want to be 6.
I'm 6 too.
I want to be 6 years old reading the story to my children when I'm reading.
And what's wonderful is you can be 6 and read fluently because you're now a 6-year-old. Whenever I do my workshops, in fact, it's a condition we should have used here, is I tell people I want you to come into the room any age between the ages of 3 and 11. Because I want them to be kind of postnatal and pre-sexual. I actually think I'm an eternal 6-year-old. There's like the wonder of the first time I ever put words to the sounds. The first time I could memorize the story of Sparky's magic piano, and then you anticipate, this is going to happen now, and it's going to happen again and again for eternity. Right. So if a parent, I can't say teach them lessons, because I'm not here as an educator of that note, but my sister wouldn't eat her spaghetti, as an example, when she was very little. And so my mother had a story of the spaghetti that ran off the plate and ran down the street and arrested these little boys who were stealing the spaghetti by winding around her foot. I can't remember the whole storyline, but I do remember, "Spaghetti, I'm a-coming to get you," which is what Mama Sophia shouted. My mother will be so happy I remembered this. This is like really a very long time ago. So it's almost like the code. "Spaghetti, I'm coming to get you," actually kind of meant eat your greens. But spaghetti, quickly, before the spaghetti comes to get you, let's eat. Right. So it's almost like incorporating it into your child raising. I don't know how you can have a kid without storytelling. You must. Even if it's not rabbits and stingrays. It could be... You can find things in your everyday life that then become the messages that you want to share with your children. And then you can find the books. The Stingray book I've just read to you is actually about the power of your mind. And we've got a little rhyme again. Alakazam, alakazing. The power of your mind is a magical thing. Alakazing, alakazoo. You make it a wish. I make it come true.
You talked about how values and stories connect. But stories is also about legacy. I tell stories to my children when things happened in our lives that were not good. We had an aunt that passed, and I happened to find a book that talked about the star in the sky.
Lovely.
You had a similar experience.
When my sister passed, my niece was about around early 30s. The baby was a kid. a little girl, like 8 months. I think she wasn't even a year yet. And obviously that affected niece and aunt, being us. We were the ones left. We were the ones who clung to each other in a way. And it was heavy and horrible and weepy. And Devon works night shift and I couldn't get out of bed. It was really just very intense. But the little baby, in other words, Riley, who's now 2.5, but she was very little then, she never met Yaya. Which my sister lived in Cyprus, so we didn't do gogo, we did Yaya, which she preferred, and she had all the T-shirts. So in order to remember Yaya, who she'll, in fact, one of Devon, my niece's great regrets is that her younger son will never know Yaya. And it's that still hurts deeply. But so I wrote a story about because Ryan was born about 6 months ago when Riley was about 2. And so I've written a story, almost not channeling my sister, that sounds a bit woo-woo, but the spirit of my sister lives on in my music, in my writing, in my heart. It's sounding very, it's something I share with vulnerability. And so I found a story that was half written. This is another thing about, if you're going to be a writer, write. That's the only advice I can give anyone. Write and write and write and write and improve and improve and improve until you can do a 40-word children's story that isn't just, that every word counts. So I had actually written a story about a little girl who was having a baby brother. And she was asking Mommy what was in her tummy. It takes a minute to read if you would like. But what it was actually Yaya, my sister's gift to the non-existent grandchild who had actually been conceived after she'd passed. So if you want to say legacy, it's a very kind of strange way, because it's also the legacy of my great-grandmother who taught the songs to my grandmother, who taught them to my mother, who's teaching them to me. So maybe I'm the reluctant conduit. Because like I said to you, I have not birthed children out of my own womb, but these are my children now. And then my ancestors, if you like, my mother is still very much alive, and we will see her within the next reasonable period of time, because our great-granny, she's actually the great-grandmother of these little children. I'm the great-aunt. And that legacy, I don't think people write for legacy, Ilana. It's like, what will last? But what will last for me is that the songs that are now 100 years old from my great-grandmother, because I'm no spring chicken, can actually last into 3 generations and more of my sister's children. So, yeah, I guess legacy's right. It's just our legacy. I don't like the me, my thing. I'm just a conduit. The stories come to me, and I just take dictation. You know how some people talk about writing like it? I don't believe that is how it is, but the more you practice, the luckier you get.
Storytelling is not just about legacy. It's also there's a big part of remembrance about it. So if you're missing someone in your heart and you want to continue, if I wanted my kids to remember my parents, thank God they're still alive, I could have told stories about mom and dad so that they remember their oma and their opa.
It's a lovely concept. My great-grandmother on my grandfather's side used to tell moral tales to her children, like what would happen if you found some money on the street and you didn't give it back. But they were all in these very sort of ancient Yiddish phraseologies.
Right.
So that made the children honest. Beatrix Potter's Tale of Peter Rabbit is a story of a naughty bunny who nearly got caught and then he missed his tea. I mean, seriously,
yeah,
everyone.
come on.
But I can recite it to you as
Don't
well.
miss your tea.
So if you are a naughty little bunny, you're going to suffer the same punishment as Peter Rabbit. But if you want to talk about ancestry, like I said to you, when I went to Cyprus and I sang with my sister, we almost created a new legacy for ourselves out of which I can bring the stories, because I'm not the grandmother here. I'm the support system. I'm the mothering, nurturing other watching from afar because they live in America and finding comfort. In fact, when and a lot of my stuff is very pretty and flowing, and of course there's danger and stuff, but there's actually a soothingness, a self-soothingness to it. And so even if I tell stories, say to my niece who's an adult about my sister, if I bring that down, and in fact after the story I might read you just now, I've wanted to find a way of recreating, because you can rewrite the story of Yaya, baby Yaya in the sky, like you said, a star. I love that idea. So that you can actually bring, it's almost out of grief can come joy, but until you can reach it, it doesn't. So I'm not going, woo, this is fantastic. It's in the depths of my despair, this emerged as almost the only thing that was still living above ground. because I was underground. I feel like I slipped into an abyss for 2 years.
Did writing stories for other people help you as part of your grieving process for your sister?
So I had written about her in the illness for the year that she was sick. When she died, I started writing to her. And it's a very interesting, it changes everything. It's almost as I'm having a dialogue with the dead. And I'm telling her, because she doesn't remember a lot of our childhood, and I remember everything. She kept, she was actually the moderator of a very widely distributed Facebook group called What Do You See From Your Window? And she posted every day. So I'm looking through the posts of her year of dying and kind of filling in the backstory for myself or for her, because she didn't like the pain. And I sit with the pain. So yes, whatever people, to keep it alive, in sense you should, or it helps to engage with that. I sometimes speak to my granny. I've decided my grandparents are hardy-dars, for example. That's a little story. And when I see them, and they come at the weirdest times, and they're always in pairs. And in fact, because my grandparents are hardy-dars, I was looking out of my window one afternoon some months ago, and a little junior hardy-dar followed them. And so, in a way, that's a little metaphor in itself. So Granny and Papa are taking care of Lane, wherever they may be, in bird heaven, in wherever they are, in the afterworld, in my memory, because it's my memory. So writing does help with memory. And yes, I write to my sister.
Stories, can it bring a certain form of understanding? I mean, you are with your child, and, I tell many stories to my children, and some I make up.
Exactly. And do you make them up with adults in them, or do you make them up with little creatures in them? How do you spin it to them?
There's no creatures in mine. No. I'm yet to learn.
You're just a little girl.
Yeah.
You can just be a little girl called Riley. You see, because I've got Riley now. Not I've got Riley. Riley's got me.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of Riley and the Rainbow Child, which and I don't. Your listeners must know this. Do you know what a rainbow child is?
What is a rainbow child?
I did not know this. A rainbow child is a baby who's born after a miscarriage.
Oh, no.
So the rainbow child is like kind of almost like not the compensation, but post an early, whatever the word is, an early termination or a miscarriage or whatever, and no one's ever acknowledged this for years and years, because the woman does go through that loss and that grief, even if it's a 4-week-old fetus. So Ryan was born after a couple of those, and so he's the rainbow. In fact, I really originally wrote it, this is quite, as Riley and the moon. I called it the new moon child. He was going to be born on the new moon. It was a lovely phrase. And then he was premature, and he went into an incubator, and a whole lot of things went down. And part of this as well is to reassure Riley, because the little boy didn't come home straight away. He actually, I don't harp on about it, but where's the baby now? And a lot of children's like, Mommy's gone to hospital. Why is she sick? So this whole homecoming and a sibling. Have you had younger siblings? Do you have younger siblings? Do your children have younger siblings? There's a lot of not the rivalry of it, but this intrusion. Apparently my father always was told they'd change the baby. And then he wanted to take his little brother to the supermarket to change him, because he didn't want the baby there at all. So it's almost channeling an inner child of the loss. I don't like the stories to be sad, but there's a sadness in it. But if this little story I'm going to read for you now is basically just saying, welcome to our family, and Yaya's watching.
How do we encourage a love for audio stories? There was a time that we would only read books. There was a time that we only read the Bible. Now we can read books off the shelf. We've got access to audiobooks. We've got access to Auntie Lala's podcasts.
Doesn't it depend on your lifestyle? This idea, and I am quite sort of on about this. The ears, in other words, if you're a blind person, the ears are, in a sense, the eyes of the soul. So if you're living your life as a human being, you can, like I say, you can listen before you can read. You can read before you can write. You can write before, etc. So actually, putting yourself into the sense of where the parent is at. I mean, the children, obviously, they've got, I mean, I know the tail wags the dog, if the dog wags the tail, is tell them stories. What are you saying to your children on a day by day? We're all in the car. I mean, that's a story of some sort. Don't worry about whether you can sing properly. Don't worry if you haven't had MAs and BAs and workshops. It's innate to us. It's natural to us to tell stories. What did you do today at school? Is a question that will solicit a story. And that's probably where they might tell you, they punched the little kid next door, or someone ate their sandwiches. Oh, who ate your sandwiches? And I do believe in repetition. It's like learning an instrument. You don't just sit down and play. So the more, and if you do listen to Solid Gold Storytime, some parents have said to me, like Gina the hardworking giraffe. She's Gina the lazy giraffe. She's too lazy by half. And in actual fact, if you've got a lazy child, the lesson in that story is it rained. She was too tall, so she had to shelter with the other little animals, and then she learned how to sort of make a braai for everyone. So those messages are innate, but if the parent becomes conscious of them, then you can work with them, then you can enlarge on them.
What's your favorite Solid Gold story?
Strangely enough, Miss Molly. So just to preface this, we were writing a series on the UN rights of the child, okay, for a campaign that never ran, so it still belongs to me. And the UN rights of the child are values like resilience, resourcefulness, hardworkingness, courage, laziness, and generosity, or something to that effect. And in a way, this is quite an insight. I think I probably am quite a resourceful little hippo. So one of the stories is about Miss Molly. She lives, these were also done for out of Africa, so Ghana and Kenya as well. So I had to find a kind of a mythical place where all little children could relate to it. So it's not in a necessary township or a flat, but she had a little hut in the village because she's a little hippo. And Miss Molly's mommy loved her, and there's a little refrain that speaks about Miss Molly, you're bright, and we love you. So it's kind of an affirmation. And then Miss Molly is in the gala. So it's all about this little cute, chubby hippo who doesn't stand a chance against the other fishies in the gala. And if you've ever been at school and you're slightly overweight, you know what it's like for the fishies, as you're looking at me now. And she goes home and she finds a pot and she finds wings, and she makes wings out of sort of spare wire. She constructs a little machine of herself to be able to beat the little bitchy fishes. And so she wins in the race, and we've got a little sound effect that goes, go Miss Molly, and she wins. And then the whole school congratulates her. So it goes from the mother affirmation to the self-affirmation to the affirmation of others, which doesn't really matter, but it helps. I like the story came formed. I love the little chorus. So I do the chorus vocals. I can do kiddie quite well for some reason. And I enjoy the fact that there's a story, spoken story, and then there's a little chorus. And the chorus is kind of the hook, as we would call it in music. We will always love you. We congratulate you. These are not new thoughts. But Miss Molly, you're bright. We congratulate you. When things don't go right, you just know what to do. Miss Molly, be wise and something and read it. And yes, and there it is in story form. Maybe at some point we will start to publish little books. But after my big book wonder, it's quite a relief to be able to put an audio piece out that will be listened to in the imagination of the parent and child. I'm very aware that and in fact, then the child, the little one, can say, I want Gina Giraffe again. Then put Gina Giraffe again. If you're traveling this summer, if you want your kid, these aren't long stories, guys. Little children don't have a huge attention
They don't
span.
have the time.
We don't even. So it's there for their delight, even if they don't comprehend it at first. And I do think that listening over and over again brings that repetition. That's how you grow. And if mommy is, needs to quickly go and wash some dishes, she can do that while they're listening, because the visual side is in your imagination, in your ears.
Well, you just heard Lynn talk about little Miss Molly. I think we need to play it for them. This is what it sounds like on her podcast.
Miss Molly the hippo loved dancing. She danced even before she was born. She moved in the womb, and she grooved to the tune that her mom sang to her every morn. Miss Molly, be bright, you will never be blue.
That's fantastic. Solid gold story time. So you can type it in anywhere and you will find Lynn's channel and you can hear many, many stories. For those of you who are traveling over the festive season, I think it's such a great tool to have audiobook stories, podcasts. And Lynn Joffe is producing and she's making them with her soothing voice. I need you to read us one more story.
Okay, so I've spoken about my sister and I've spoken about the children. And like I said to you, Ryan, the new baby, was supposed to be born on the new moon, which was a lovely new moon child. And then he wasn't. And then he went into an incubator.
No.
And Riley was like, where is this kid? But I don't focus on that. I focused on kind of the joy of the homecoming because I remember when my own sister was born. Oh, it's a sister, is what I said. So this is called Riley and the Rainbow Child. It will probably come with a bit of music and a bit of backtrack with the sister.
But for now, it's just you.
Sweet little Riley looked up at her mommy, saying, "Mommy, what's growing inside of your tummy? It's jiggling and wriggling and juggling around."
Just put your ear here, dear, and hark to the sound.
"A baby," said Mom, "made by father and mother." "A baby, a real baby brother."
And then there's a little chorus that will say something like, say hey to the rainbow baby, say hey to the rainbow child, say hey to the rainbow baby. So that will kind of be a, say hey to the rainbow child.
"A brother," said Riley. "That's cooler than cool. I'll feed him and burp him and show him the rules. I'll switch on the kettle to warm up the bottle and teach him the games that I play quite a lot'll."
And not that much later, a baby was born, in slivers of starshine, an hour before dawn. But Ryan was early. He'd come out too soon, and so he was put in a moon bag till June. When lungs were much stronger and rose in his cheeks, they brought him home healthy and nursed him for weeks. And Riley helped Mummy as best as she could. She ate all her veggies, and boy, was she good. From the moment they met, they adored one another, our sweet little Riley and Ryan, her brother. She helped Mummy to feed him, she rinsed out his bib, she sang him sweet songs at the edge of his crib. She switched off the lights when his time came for dozes and took lots of selfies in various poses. And as they grew up, she taught Ryan to read and how to grow sunflowers from one little seed. She looked up the science and showed him the way, that blowing on windmills turns night into day, and sticking balloons onto walls at a party and charging up magnets. She sure was a smarty. They both learned to bath in a mere drop of water, and Yaya smiled down on her grandson and daughter. Say hey to the rainbow baby, say hey to the rainbow child, say hey to the rainbow baby. Say hey to the rainbow child.
Lynn Joffe in studio.